today, right? So as many of you know, I am one of the two co-founders at Interview Kickstart, right? My name is Ryan. Prior to Interview Kickstart, I used to work as an entrepreneur in residence at Accel Partners, which is a very popular, right, very successful venture capital firm based in the Bay Area. I suppose what Accel is best known for is being the first really large institutional investor in Facebook. Prior to that, I ran a large e-commerce company, hired a bunch of folks. What I am really passionate about, right, is human performance, and in general, helping people up level. The poster that you see at the side there is by far my favorite quote, right? It is. I have a huge poster of this up in my room. It's the Muhammad Ali saying, "I truly believe that impossible is nothing if you put your mind to it." Now, I have a deep personal connect with this subject, right? With the subject of anxiety. And let me share a little bit with you. I grew up stuttering quite significantly, right? To the extent that, when I was in school and you had times in class when you had to read, I would constantly calculate the number of lines people had to read, and I would keep changing my seat every day. And it was always a competition of the bell, the number of lines versus my calculation and where I sat in class. And somewhere along the line, something just switched. And one day I decided that, I'm going to try my hand at debating, right? And so I raised my hand, and I think it was in class 8. I went up to my class teacher and said, "Ma'am, I want to try public speaking." And she was obviously concerned for me because she didn't want me to put myself out there, be vulnerable, embarrass myself. But she gave me a shot, right? And I have never looked back. For many years, I led a dual life, right? I would stutter off the stage, but I would never stutter on stage. I practiced, I prepared, I learned to over a period of time where it was actually quite funny. I went on to become an international debating champion. I debated for the country. I participated in a whole bunch of international tournaments, and I never stammered on stage. But every time I went up to collect an award or collect a prize, if I won, I would always stammer when I gave a thank you speech, right? Eventually, I realized that's just part of who I am, right? And I moved on. That is fundamentally the defining experience of my life, right? And so I deeply connect with this topic of anxiety, right? And how important it is. Quick introduction to Interview Kickstart. A lot of you know who we are, so I'm not going to really take much time. We are the definitive platform to prepare for very tough technical interviews, right? We approach this very uniquely. Our goal is to work with people to help them really become a better engineer, right? Soham and I, who founded it, being hiring managers ourselves, and we have a lot of hiring managers on the platform, what we've realized is that fundamentally you can't hack this interview process. And so our goal is really forcing you to become a better engineer, right? Working with you on key things like algorithms, data structure, system design, all the foundational blocks, right, that go into making you a better engineer. And it's almost as a result, the outcome of becoming a better engineer is that you tend to go on and succeed very widely. We've been doing this for a long time. We have been doing this for 6 years. We worked with over 4,000 students, 5,000 plus offers. The average offer is around 250K plus. I'd say the highest offer that we've got is about 650K. The crux of what we do is very simple. We work with you. You work with a bunch of experts, all hiring managers, technical leads, folks who are actual participants in the interview process, who deeply understand the bar, right? So they can teach you experientially. In terms of the way we teach via patterns, right? The insight that we have, the secret sauce that we have on our curriculum is that you need to be able to solve unseen questions. And so trying to prepare via learning a bunch of questions doesn't work. You need to understand the key patterns that are tested. And you need to have a system, right? One of the common things that I tell people is that being a working engineer and trying to up-level is almost like having 2 jobs, right? And the strength of your current job is so much that it's a strong gravitational pull to keep you back in, especially for those who are parents as well, right? And so what you need is some sort of strong system to kind of pull you out, right? Escape velocity, if you may, right? To use a physics term, to bring you out of the orbit of your current job and take you to an orbit of where you can go, right? And that is broadly what we do. this is really where folks end up going to, right? We are well known for sending folks to the FANG companies, and now FANG is an acronym for a lot of good companies, right? I would consider Uber, LinkedIn, Dropbox, Box, Snapchat, all kind of in that category. We are really passionate about helping folks make the best of their software careers. Because if you abstract this for a second and you think about it, essentially an interview is all that stands between you and a retirement nest egg, which is 6 figures or 7 figures, right? And being a software engineer, you have that phenomenal opportunity. And that is really what we are passionate about, right? All of us on IK are passionate about helping people up level. Some people take a few months, some people take a few more months. That's fine. It's not a race, right? It's just about getting to the finish line. So that, folks, is about, that's what Interview Kickstart is about. Feel free to go on to interviewkickstart.com to learn more. You can register for a webinar that I do quite often. That's the best way to find out about the program. But today is not about Interview Kickstart, right? Today's session is about how do you deal with this really challenging concept of interview anxiety. Couple of guidelines for today, folks. If you look at Zoom, you'll see that there is a place for chat and there's a place for Q&A, right? Don't mix the two. If you have a question, and I'm sure you guys are going to have a bunch of questions, just ping me where it says Q&A. I'll keep checking that out from time to time. At the end of this session, we'll go through those. I will call on a few folks, take up some questions, right? We'll play it iteratively. If there's a message that you want to send me, you want to discuss something, send it to me on chat. There are going to be a couple of polls that we are going to run today, right? Do take a minute to answer those polls. It kind of sets the context for what we're going to do, right? I'm going to start with a bunch of opening remarks, uncover some of the myths, right, that people commonly mistake as being real when it comes to interview anxiety. We're going to spend some time understanding the fundamental causes of interview anxiety, right? Why do technical interviews fundamentally bring these out? The crux of this is going to be, how do you deal with this? What are some of the tried and tested systematic ways to approach this, right? That we have learned through our students and working with our students. And then we're going to have an open-ended discussion. Aditya, one of our alums is here, right? He's been gracious enough to come spend some time, talk about his experience with interview anxiety, how he's overcome it. I might call on a few members from the audience for questions as well. And then we're going to have an open Q&A. Okay, so that sounds good. Let's actually get started. Let's start with a poll, right? Before I actually run the opening remarks. Steph, if you are there, can you just run poll 1, right, folks? So poll 1 is started. Essentially, what I want to understand is, for all of you, and this is anonymous, right? So I can't see the names. What's your level of interview anxiety, right? 10 is very high, 1 is very low, right? So I'm going to run this poll for another maybe 10, 20 seconds. I see a whole bunch of people. Wow, we've got a lot of people answering. About 100 of you already answered. I think we're almost done. Okay, looks like the numbers are coming in pretty fast. All right, let's actually give the poll another 2-3 seconds, and then let's end it. I think most of you already answered. Okay, great. Let's actually. All right, I'm going to now, okay, so very high, right? Above 6, right? I'm going to just share the results. Above 6, we have, well, what is this? 60, 65, 67, 72. 10% are at 10. Wow. So if you look at less than 6, right? So with 5 being the midpoint, we have only 6% of people, maybe more, 18% of people, right? So about 80% of folks have interview anxiety that is above the halfway mark, right? And if I take 7 as being very high interview anxiety, that is close to, well, more than 50%, 55, 60%. That is humongous. So 60% of people today here, and there are 150 of you here, right, have interview anxiety level that is 7 and above, right? I would consider that very high interview anxiety. 6 and above, it's about 80%. And so the point to be made here is that this is, as is evidenced by the poll, a really important thing, and not enough gets talked about, right? Unfortunately, the way the prevailing literature is, it is really, it's very macho literature. It's like, the best engineers, you go out there, the best and the brightest crack top interviews, and nobody talks about the rest, right? But the reality is about 95% of people who attend interviews are failing those interviews, right? Many of those because they are fundamentally anxious, right? And so this is hugely critical, right? Now, this is exaggerated, right, for minority communities and for women, right? Now, they are already, to some extent, worried about the interview process, fewer representation in tech companies, and anxiety affects this category even more, right? So and it's something that I feel very strongly about, and I think we should be talking about this. It is important to draw a fine line between what can be considered as interview anxiety and what is much more like clinical anxiety, which is much more extreme, right? I'm not a licensed therapist, right? I'm here because I believe that people who have interview anxiety can fundamentally work to overcome it, right? And so I'm going to really draw the line and talk about folks who don't have clinical anxiety, but have anxiety, maybe performance anxiety to some extent, but fundamentally, right, anxiety in an interview context, okay? So that's really the guidelines for how we get started. Now, there are a number of myths, right? Many things out there that people believe that are far from true, okay? I'm going to address the top 5 because I want all of you to know that these are just myths, right? The reality is very different. Few people have it, right? Because nobody talks about them. Everybody believes that, this is something that only I have, maybe a couple of others. I'm not openly talking about it. It's not seen as a safe thing to talk about. The reality, as we saw on today's session, is now there, there might be a self-selection bias here, but even then, 80% of people above a 7, right? The reality is anxiety is a spectrum, right? Everybody is somewhere on that spectrum. And the reality is anxiety is actually good for you, right? It's your fight or flight mechanism that is coming to play, right? And if you can channel that anxiety, it is something that makes sure that you are fundamentally alert. Now, scientifically, what happens in this context is if you can manage your anxiety and keep it at a right level, your dopamine starts kicking in, right? Dopamine is what gets, it's what keeps you very alert, right? It's what happens when you have the flight response, right? Now, if you have controlled flight response and you are able to control your levels of dopamine, you effectively can bring your A game to an interview, right? So first myth is to just accept that, hey, this is something that many people have. If I have it, it's completely okay. Everybody's on a spectrum. We saw that spectrum, right? On a scale of 1 to 10. The second is that, this sign of attitude or belief that, if I have it, I really can't overcome it. The truth is, why, if the first thing to keep in mind is that you don't need to overcome it. That's the wrong word, right? The reality is you need to learn how to deal with it, right? And one can absolutely deal with it by putting in place very simple systematic ways, right? And Aditya is going to talk about how he did that, right? I'm going to talk about a system as well. But remember that you don't need to overcome it. You need to accept it and then figure out, like I did with my stammering, right? You have it. Now, how do you go about dealing with it? And it's part of who you are, right? It's part of your personality. And we all have our unique characteristics. This is just one of yours, right? You can't succeed with it. The reality is we have seen, right? I'm not sure, if Ashima is on today. Ashima is one of our candidates who I remember very clearly. Ashima was somebody who did struggle with interview anxiety, and she did a fabulous job. She ended up going on to do the course, becoming an engineering manager at one of the FANG companies, a phenomenal outcome, right? Ali is one of our students as well, very recent. Ali struggled with interview anxiety in general. And he was very open about it, right? And while he was doing the program, he kept focusing on this. I remember Ali because it's quite recent. I think in middle of April, he ended up getting all the FANG companies, every single one of them, right? And last I remember, he was choosing between Google and Facebook. But you can succeed very wildly, even if you have significant interview anxiety, right? That's a very, very important thing to internalize. Now, one of the big misconceptions about the interview process, which leads to this anxiety, is that this is a standardized test, right? And so if I fail the test, then there's something wrong with me. The reality is, guys, this is not a standardized test. Soham, this is one of his favorite sayings. An interview is much more like a date than a test, right? And for anybody who's gone on a date, sometimes they can go just horribly wrong, right? And the reality is, it's a two-person event, right? You might have done your best, you might have brought flowers and chocolates, right? But the other person just didn't connect. And in an interview, that is exactly the case, right? You might have done incredibly well, but it could just be something that has not worked out between you and the interviewer. Maybe the interviewers had a bad day, right? Maybe they had a challenging time at home. Maybe he had a bad drive to work. Maybe he's kind of not in the best of moods. Doesn't matter. It's just an interview. It's just a date, right? If you look at it like that, right, there is much less onus, right, of taking responsibility for failure that you'll put on yourself. You must internalize, you must try and figure out what went wrong, right? But know that it's not a standardized test, right? And so there is no pressure to say that if you've not succeeded, it's fundamentally about you. This is the most important myth, that I go to an interview and it's really a fight between the interviewer and me. It is competition between the interviewer and me. He's trying to make me fail or she's trying to make me fail. My job is to try and overcome that and succeed. Far from true. Interviewers want you to succeed. Good interviewers will go out of their way to try and help you succeed, right? Very often they will give you hints to try and solve problems. They will make you comfortable. They will chat with you. Understand why. As an interviewer, when a company takes me out of my day job and puts me in an interview context, they have taken away valuable engineering time, right? At a top company, good folks are paid upwards of 300K, right? You think about how much that is worth per hour, right? And in an interview, the guy has to prepare before, he spends time with you, she spends time with you, then she writes notes. Oftentimes, in companies like an Amazon, there is a discussion, they will discuss it with a bar raiser. There is a lot of time that every interviewer spends in an interview with you. And if you abstract this and you look at a company level, companies are spending, millions and millions of dollars in the interviewing process and putting their best engineers there, right? Because that's how they want to get good folks come into the company. And so really an interview is that you and the interviewer are on the same side of the table, right? And if you internalize that, right, you can work with the interviewer in an interview, and it can be much more discussion versus a competition, right? So these folks, when you think about the fact that interview anxiety is a spectrum, everybody's on it. There are systems that you can put in place to overcome it. People deal with it. There is no need to overcome it. You have a system, you find the system that works for you, can have wild success. This is a date, right? It's a discussion. You and the interviewer are aligned. If you go in with that mindset, right, you will realize that this is not as extreme as one would think it would be. Now, what causes interview anxiety, right? What I've noticed when I've talked to folks is that most people who suffer from some form of interview anxiety, especially the more extreme forms, right, tend to, if they're self-aware, they tend to have some sort of anxiety in life in general, right? And that's fine. It's a personality trait. It's not a big deal, right? The reality is there are a bunch of elements, traits, right? Characteristics of a technical interview process that highlight this. And knowing what these are and being aware that these do cause some more anxiety is a very powerful tool in your favor, because then you can understand, right? And give yourself a break to know why you are feeling a little bit more anxious. Okay, let's dig deep and try and understand what those causes are. But before I actually jump into the causes and talk about them, I'm going to run my second poll. Steph, can you run the second poll? The second poll, guys, is just what do you think causes you interview anxiety, right? We've already started the poll. So if you guys can just take maybe the next 10, 20 seconds and just ping me answers. Okay, yeah, good. Okay, let's wait for another 10, 15 seconds. You seem to have almost everybody in here. All right. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now, and then I'm going to share the result. Okay, we have a few more people actually responding. Very interesting. Okay, I am just sharing the results. All right. Okay, so this is a multiple choice, right? So it's very interesting. Fear of failure. I've shared the results. You guys can all look at it. Like, let's look at it together. Fear of failure really seems to be the number one cause of anxiety. Okay, 69%, fairly high, very high actually. Need to solve questions fast, complex interview questions. Okay, high stakes, interesting, very interesting. So what I wouldn't have predicted is that unfamiliar interview environment would be so low. Because when I talk to folks, actually unfamiliar environment is quite a significant cause. Interesting. Okay, so let's keep this in mind, right? Let's keep this in mind as we go through these 5 causes. Okay, guys, I see a bunch of you are raising your hand. Just give me a couple of minutes. I'm going to come in and then take questions in a second. Now, causes of interview anxiety, right? The crux of this challenge, as we saw, 50% or so, is that the kind of questions that you get asked in interviews are very different from what you are getting at your day job and what you learned in university, right? Even if you have a CS degree. The way to think about this, right, and internalize this is that these are more competitive programming oriented types of questions, right? And the interview process, truth be told, is getting more complex year on year because of the number of people who are applying, right? It helps to understand why companies interview like this, right? There are 2 reasons. The first is what companies have internalized is that technology is changing so fast, right? That to have a good engineer, what they really need to look for is somebody who has very core engineering skills, right? Because they can apply themselves to new technology. And the way they test that is really by looking at these sort of core CS, competitive programming, algorithmic coding, system design kind of questions. The second reason is actually much less known, but I'd say far more important. It's just the sheer logistics of it. Companies like Google are interviewing like 5,000 people a week. Now it's very difficult to match people from the same domain, right? If you're interviewing so many folks. And so one of the ground level realities is that you do need to match engineers from different domains in the same interview. And so, if you think about it, what would be common between, let's say, somebody who has a backend background and somebody who has an AI or an ML background, right? Now, AI, ML are job roles that are increasing very significantly. Data engineering, data science. How do you match those folks? You do it by having common ground, right? And common ground is essentially problem-solving kind of questions, right? But that is a big cause of anxiety because these are questions that you've not done before, and one does require to prepare, right? So I'd say that's one of the key causes, right? Here it was about 50, 52%. Need for speed. Now, if that was not challenging enough, the expectation is that you will solve 2 questions in 40 minutes, right? A tough question in 30 minutes, easier question in 10 minutes, kind of warm up. And so the combination of having to solve challenging questions in a short time is, can be a little unnerving if you haven't practiced. High stakes for sure. The reality is when you are doing this, you are fundamentally trying to UpLevel, right? Fear of failure, right? That was the biggest one today. That is because most people, right? It's a combination of high stakes and fear of failure is the same thing, right? It's very difficult putting yourself out there, right? It is very difficult putting yourself out there, being judged, and you come back and you think, hey, why did I fail? Right? Was I not good enough? Right? And these are questions that everybody asks. The surprising thing that came about today was that the artificial construct of an interview didn't really rank high, but I would actually submit that the artificial nature of a technical interview is what exponentially multiplies all the other causes. Because if you think about it, right, an interview is very, very different from what you do on your regular day job. Okay. Now I'm going to actually take a minute to share something that one of our instructors, right, said in an interview recently. But guys, give me a second. I'm going to reshare my screen because I think I forgot to share my computer sound, right? So give me a second. Okay. So, in this context, let me actually share this video, and then I'm going to take some of the questions. I think few people have their hands up, right? So just turn up your volume. Give this a second, right? So this is Yanni, right? Yanni used to lead a team that built a whole bunch of ML components at Siri, right? Very, very smart guy, exceptionally good about thinking about a tech career. Yanni has since moved from Apple and he is now at Google, right? So, I just want to play this for a few seconds and hear what Yanni says. And it's important to understand why this makes people anxious. Okay, so hold on a second.
Helping people prepare, you're because so much of an interview is not a daily task. In your day-to-day, you speak with your coworkers, you have multiple chances to interact with them, they know you, you have an opportunity to go back and say, oh, I think I misspoke in the previous meeting, oh, I thought about it more and this is the right way to approach it. In the interview, you don't know these people, they don't know you, they don't have all the context about you. And you get this one opportunity in this day, or these 5 individual opportunities during the day, to really promote yourself and to show them what you can really do. And it's a very unnatural environment. You just don't do this every day. So one of the key things that IK does.
So that was Yanni, folks, right? And the point I want to make is when you internalize that this is a very unnatural environment and that it is going to enhance some of the other causes of interview anxiety, what I want you guys to all remember is that it is okay. It is okay. The environment is set up, right, in a manner that brings out some level of anxiety. And so if you find that your anxiety levels are going up a little bit before an interview, it is absolutely okay. This is why every single person has anxiety before they go in for an interview, right? Now, before I get to talking about how you can overcome them, right? I see there were a bunch of people who actually have asked questions and a bunch of people have raised their hand, right? So I'm going to take one question and then maybe I'll take a couple of people who've raised their hands and, and take their questions. So Fatma says, there's a question that I'm reading, right? Says, hey, Ryan, thank you so much for the session. It's very helpful. I was wondering if you can share your thoughts on how to deal with fatigue, right? And keep motivational up while preparing for a FANG interview. Fatma, I am going to answer this question, but I'm going to answer it in my next slide, right? Because it's, I'll take the question there. There are a couple of techniques that you can use. So bear with me for a second. There are a bunch of people who've raised their hands. So I'm going to just try and see who has raised their hands. Hold on a second. Okay. For some reason, I'm not able to actually see who's raised their hands. So guys, if somebody is raising a hand, can you raise your hand again, if you don't mind? So I can just, for some reason, I'm not able to see who has actually raised a hand. Okay, you know what? Maybe we'll continue and I'll come back to taking questions. Okay. All right. So, continuing, right? We've talked about the fact that interview anxiety is real. Accept it. There are a bunch of reasons that cause it. Now, how do you deal with it, right? So, I've created this acronym, right? Which is, you fundamentally just code, okay? Now, what does code mean? First is, let's go back to what we are talking about, right? That the interview is actually a discussion, right? It's a date, right? It's not a one-way street. The first thing to internalize, guys, is that you can control the interview, right? And you must seek to control the interview. You can practice how you can control the interview, right? There are some very specific techniques that you can use. Let's talk about a few. One of the things that we tell people as part of our behavioral side of the process is that actually, when you get anxious, what happens is your blood is pumping, your heart rate is pumping, you start breathing very fast, right? Slowing down your breathing is actually a very good way to get yourself much more calm. There are a whole bunch of mindfulness, breathing techniques that you can use, and they really help you get centered, right? Centering is important. But a couple of things that you can do in an interview. When you start an interview, right, feel free to ask for time, right? So if somebody says, for example, they ask you a question, tell them, give me a couple of minutes, right? I want to just make sure that I've internalized the question. I want to paraphrase the question back to you to make sure that we are both on the same page, right? It's okay to ask an interviewer for time. You say, give me a minute. I want to collect my thoughts. I want to think about it. I want to make sure that I'm very clear about where I'm going. Give me some time, right? Now, what happens in an interview is that life is moving at warp speed, right? So you think you're taking a lot of time, actually you're not, right? You can even ask the interviewer saying, hey, I just want to check that I'm heading in the right direction, right? And if not, the interviewer will give you a hint. So one of the things that good interviewers do is they kind of lead the interview, right? By asking questions like this, by taking time, by slowing down. When you practice interviewing, and we'll talk about how you practice interviewing in a second, feel free to practice taking control, right? And it's as easy as just asking for some time. So first and foremost, try and control that interview. Second, the heart of dealing with interview anxiety, guys, is that you must over-prepare. Not just prepare, you must over-prepare, because the thing is, you can't be at extremes in an interview process. This is certainly not a process that people can wing, right? You can't just show up in an interview and hope to wing it, because an interview has a bunch of folks that you'll be meeting, very, very highly qualified folks. And an interview is very asymmetric, right? The interviewer needs to know only one question. You need to know a whole bunch of curriculum because you don't know what's coming your way. Now, while you can't wing it and be on the extreme of being underprepared, it doesn't help to go and try and do every single question out there, right? There are about 15 to 16,000 types of interview questions that one can get asked. And so it's a fool's errand to try and do everything. So what do I mean by over-prepare, right? What I mean is get comfortable with all the various common topics, right? Arrays, strings, recursion, dynamic programming, concurrency, You know, there are a standard list of topics that you must prepare for, right? At IK, we ourselves have evolved over a period of time, right? One of the things we've started doing now is we've started realizing that a better way of teaching is to actually teach patterns versus questions, right? Because once you internalize patterns versus questions, you realize that if you know some of the inherent patterns of topics, you can solve many different types of questions, right? Now, so when I say over prepare, what I mean is understand what are the topics being asked, understand what are the patterns in those topics, and then actually practice, get really good at them, spend a couple of hours every day. It doesn't matter whether you take a couple of months, whether you take 6 months, whether you take 8 months, or whether you take 2 months. Preparing is at the heart of overcoming this, right? There are some very simple things that you can do as well. When a recruiter reaches out to you, right? Ask the recruiter, what am I going to be asked? What is my interview process going to look like, right? Am I going to have a lot of problem solving oriented questions? Is this going to be much more about domain interviewing? Even when you have a phone screen, right? Feel free to reach out to the interviewer and say, hey, ma'am, what is this phone screen going to be about, right? So you're mentally prepared, right? Second thing, don't jump into an interview, right? Remember that you should over prepare. So if somebody's, you know, very often people are excited when a Google recruiter or a Facebook recruiter or an Amazon interviewer reaches out to them. Hold your horses, right? You tell an interviewer that, ma'am, I'm super excited about the opportunity to interview at a Google or a Facebook or, you know, company X, but I do want to prepare, right? Give me some time. Let me know what are the things, what's my interview going to be like? Typically, who's going to be interviewing me, right? What's the nature of this role? Thank you so much for all that information. Do you have any information that I can use to prepare effectively? Most companies have some sort of interview prep that they send out. And then tell them that, you know, I want to take a few months and I'm going to reach out to you when I'm absolutely ready. Don't be afraid. Even in times like this, right? Where everything is awry, what we are seeing is that tech companies are doing incredibly well, right? Facebook has recently announced that they're going to hire 10,000 or so folks. Most top companies are hiring, you know, apart from, let's say, the companies that are in the entertainment, travel, tourism space in tech, the others are booming. Tech has actually come out of the pandemic even better. You look at their stock prices, right? You look at the difference, the arbitrage between the NASDAQ and the Dow Jones or the S&P, right? It's for the first time that the NASDAQ is so much higher, right? And that is because it's powered by tech stocks. Even the S&P has been pulled up really by the FANG sets of companies. So the reality is that these companies are hiring and they're not going to stop hiring, right? Because if they have to grow, they have to hire. And so give yourself enough space to prepare. The good thing today versus, let's say, 6 years ago when we started is that now there are established pathways. There are very structured pathways that can take you step by step to UpLevel very significantly. Interview Kickstart is only one, right? We are kind of at the extreme because we are about live classes, we are about working with hiring managers, we are about learning with patterns, creating a system, but there are lighter weight ways as well, right? And it really depends on what kind of person you are, what works. Do you want to have a forcing function, right? That's kind of the way we work. Do you want to be very flexible, right? So there are a whole bunch of ways. There are a bunch of free resources as well, right? Now, 6 years ago, this wasn't the case at all. So today there is a plethora of opportunities, right, to prepare. You know, we are one. We have a very structured guided pathway, but there are others. So prepare. Take the time to prepare and feel free to work with the recruiter, just like you'd work with the interviewer when you get an interview. Work with the recruiter, right? Tell them you want more time to prepare. Ask for help. That's the O. The D is crucial. Many people think they need to practice. The truth is, you need deliberate practice. Now, what is the difference between deliberate practice and practice? The term deliberate practice comes from Malcolm Gladwell, right? You know, from his book Outliers, where the 10,000 hours became very famous, right? And it comes from sports. What deliberate practice means is you need to practice, but you need to practice in simulated environments, right? Because that is how you bring your A game, and that's how you get comfortable with that environment. Let me give you two environments that are important to practice when it comes to an interview. And they both focus on the challenging part of an interview process, which is solving tough questions in a short period of time. The first is when you are practicing on an IDE or some sort of coding platform, right? On an Interview Kickstart, if you're practicing on UpLevel or IK Web, right, which is our coding environment, set timelines, right? Now, this is a continuum. So when you start practicing, don't worry about the time. When you start your interview prep, you're in the beginning, don't have this construct that, you know what, I need to do this in 30 minutes. That's not good. When you start, you'll take a couple of hours. Sometimes you won't be able to solve a question, right? After 2 hours of solving a question, actually step away, right? The mind works in two ways, focused and unfocused, right? And when you move away from a problem, it's called dispersed thinking, right? That is why we have some brilliant ideas in the shower, or we have brilliant ideas while washing the dishes, right? Because it is processing at the back of your mind. It's why you have great ideas when you sleep, right? Walk away from a problem, come back, right? So step one, phase one of preparing, when you're trying to understand the basics, is not to worry about time, right? 2 hours, multiple days, going back and forth, taking help, seeking, looking at answers, it's all fine. As you start going down the process, you then start introducing time, right? And to begin with, set up longer time, right? Set up 1.5 hour time frames, right? To solve questions. If you are unable to, walk away, come back and try and solve the same question in 1.5 hours, right? Or maybe start with 2 hours, then go to 1.5, then go to 1, then go to half an hour, right? Build it up over time. Don't start with the expectation that I will solve a question in 30 minutes and then get dejected. No, nobody solves questions in half an hour to start. That is really the end outcome. That's the finish line, right? The starting is when you have your training wheels on, right? And training wheels are when you don't have time. But get to a point over time where as you get closer and closer to interviews that you want to set yourself these sort of time boundaries. The second is do practice in a mock interview environment, because getting comfortable in an interview is important. Somebody judging you, somebody looking at you code, not having the ability to go back, practicing taking control in an interview environment, asking for help, controlling your breathing, making sure that, how do you feel? How do you feel when you go into an interview, right? Everybody feels unique. And knowing how you feel, knowing how to control yourself is very important. That doesn't come if you don't simulate, right? So if you think about practice, step one, get comfortable with the problems, get comfortable with the curriculum, get comfortable with the patterns. Step two, start creating loose timelines. Step three, kind of self-prep, but tighter timelines, and then build up to actually doing mock interviews. Now, while you can do mock interviews with anybody, we have an extreme view here. We believe that ultimately you must do interviews with hiring managers or tech leads who are actual company interviewers, because they know the bar, and do it with a safety net so you can get feedback, right? Do many of these so that you get very comfortable and you know how a hiring manager thinks, you know what the bar is, right? Getting feedback is very important, right? And so having that feedback loop where you go in for an interview, you get feedback, you come back, good or bad, doesn't matter. You internalize it, you go back, you work a bit more, build a bit more resilience, and then you come for your next date. You go back, work, get better, come for your next date. Go back, work better, come for your next date, right? And so it's a process, right? And we'll talk about it. I'm going to take Fatma's question in terms of stamina there as well, right? So deliberate practice, guys, is incredibly useful. Try and record your interviews. Go back, look at the recorded version of your interviews, because you will realize that everybody, interviewing is like a bit of a fingerprint, right? Everybody has some trait or the other. Also look at patterns. Every 4 or 5 interviews, try and understand, is there a common theme, right? I'm just telling you what we do at IK and what we've learned, right? But you can do this by yourself. Find hiring managers, get them to do interviews with you, get feedback, try and record it on your computer, on your phone, whatever, right? And then go back and look at your interview as a third person. Identify the anti-patterns. Usually, succeeding at interviews is less about finding tremendous ways to succeed It's more about eliminating failure points, right? It's more about eliminating the 1 or 2 anti-patterns. The most common anti-pattern is people not asking clarifying questions, jumping into code straight away, and then having a oh no moment a few minutes down saying, am I really on the right track? But you can actually ask questions, clarify, right? So deliberate practice is at the heart of preparation once you have already done your prep. Finally, and now I'm going to take Fatma's question as well. Be realistic about this. Having an evolutionary mindset is very key. Now, what is an evolutionary mindset, right? The best place to learn things is to look at nature. Nature took 380 million years to get us to a point to where we are today, right? Where humans, actually to get to a point where humans started on the planet, if I'm not right, but millions, hundreds of millions of years, right? And we started by being algae. Then we were multi-cell organisms. Then we were fish. Then some fish came out to land. Some of those stayed on land. Some of those went back, right? Essentially, think of this as an evolving process. Now, at the heart of the evolving process is survival of the fittest. And in this case, it is survival of the fittest techniques, not of the fittest person, of the fittest techniques. So try different things, see what works for you, and go in with a growth mindset. Now, one of my favorite books is this book called Anti-Fragile, right, by Nicholas Taleb. And Anti-Fragile effectively says, find ways to get better with volatility, right? So what's an anti-fragile, what's a growth mindset here? The mindset to have when you're preparing is that I get better with feedback. Not that I need good feedback, not that I'm going to, criticize myself if I get bad feedback. Feedback is good. And so go in and have an open mindset, right? A growth mindset is me plus hard work plus feedback is a better me. Me plus no feedback is just me, right? And so if you go in with a growth mindset, right? And I go back to my example about stammering. I knew that I would stammer. There were times when I would make a fool of myself, but I never internalized that as making a fool of myself, right? When you go for companies, right? Set up what you call starter company interviews. Your tier 2, tier 3 companies, not your favorite companies. Start interviewing with them. Start interviewing in practice environments. Get feedback. Some of the feedback will be negative. That's fine. That's also good, right? You are basically growing. Now, this is the image you need to have in mind, right? So this is a very famous image. It is developed by Ray Dalio in his book Principles, right? Ray Dalio runs Bridgewater, which is possibly the most successful hedge fund out there, right? Now, this is how he defines the evolutionary process. Now, if you look at it, it's not a straight line. You go up, you hit failure, then you go down. But when you go down, you work on it, and you come back and it propels you to the next level. So the loop is where you're building resilience and more capability, and you're getting propelled to the next level. Then you'll hit another wall. Again, you'll go down. Again, you'll go to the next level, right? And that is how the interview process is. That is how the prep process is. When you are in that circular loop, it can feel very frustrating, right? Because it can feel that you are actually going back. Wow, I'm overshooting on time. You feel that you're going back, but you're actually just building resilience and capability, and you're propelling yourself to the next level, right? This image, if you keep this in mind and you realize that I'm going through like now the circle loop, it is much easier to deal with this, right? And so Fatma, your question about keeping stamina. The first thing to keep in mind is that when you are applying to a FANG company, have realistic expectations. Thus, the selection rate at a Google is even more extreme than it's tougher to get into Google than it is to get into Stanford. So first understand that, right? And remember that you're going to have to prepare for a long time, right? The way you manage your stamina is to create a system of preparation, stepping away, making sure you take care of yourself, not having false expectation, but fundamentally building stamina comes by understanding this graph, right? That you will go through the loops, but you're really getting better and better, right? Now, one mistake that people make and which actually affects stamina is that they're on either extreme. Sometimes they feel this is going to happen very fast, which is unrealistic. And at the other extreme, they don't bound it, right? And so they keep preparing. That also doesn't work, right? Eventually you will have diminishing returns, right? There's a very famous curve in economics called the Laffer's curve, right? The Laffer's curve basically says that as you raise taxes, you'll collect more money. But once you cross a point with higher taxes, you'll come down, right? And that's the same way it works with interview prep. More effort doesn't always yield better results, right? You have to have it bounded. You must know when you're on the up curve, when you're starting to do better and better, and then interview. That is why we believe that it's important to have forcing functions. So in terms of stamina, I would say 2 or 3 things. Make sure you take an evolutionary approach. You understand when you're that you're going to go into the loops. Secondly, make sure that, like the Laffer's curve, you're not doing this infinitely. You have very strong endpoints. Good endpoints are by setting up interviews, right? But do that only once you've practiced, otherwise they can be intimidating. And the third thing is set up a system, right? A system of discipline, a forcing function that forces you to prepare every week. Momentum in an interview prep construct is your friend, right? Now, one of my favorite actors is Bryan Cranston, right? Anybody who's watched Breaking Bad, knows who he is. He was pretty much stopped at the Oscar ceremony and asked about his view on success, right? And he talks about the growth mindset as an audition mindset, right? So I'm going to play this for a second. It's a 2-minute video. There's a lot of ambient sound, right? But try and listen to what he says. It's remarkably useful, right? So let's hear what Bryan Cranston had to say.
Well, the best advice for fellow actors is this: know what your job is. About 18 years ago, I had this cognition that I realized I was going into auditions trying to get a job. And that simply wasn't what I was doing. It wasn't what I'm supposed to be doing. An actor is supposed to create a compelling, interesting character that serves the text. You present it in the environment where your audition happens, and then you walk away, and that's it. Everything else is out of your control, so don't even think of it. Don't focus on that. You're not going there to get a job. You're going there to present what you do. You act, and there it is, and walk away. And there's power in that, and there's confidence in that. And it's also saying, I can only do so much. And then the decision of who might get a job is so out of your control that it really, when you analyze it, it makes no sense to hold on to that. That, to me, was a breakthrough. And once I adapted that.
So, he could have said anything, okay? But what he chose to say is that you should think about this as an audition. You just go, try and present the best version of yourself. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, right? That is what an interview process is. You prepare, you create a system, you work with folks, you practice in a very deliberate way. You show up for an interview, you show up for an audition. Sometimes the audition works out, and sometimes the audition doesn't work out. That, folks, is the best way to sum up what we've been talking about till now. Now, I am going to actually ask Aditya to join me. Aditya, are you there? Aditya, can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me? See me?
I can. Everyone? Awesome. Yeah. All right, folks. So, I was hoping to have Aditya come on a little earlier, but my part of this went on a bit longer. Hopefully it's useful. So I want to quickly introduce Aditya, guys. Aditya is an Interview Kickstart alum, right? He's been very gracious to spare his time today. And I want to thank Aditya in particular because, we had a last minute change and Aditya jumped in to help out. Aditya, as he's, as you learn, right? He was somebody who found interviewing challenging because of anxiety, right? We're going to talk about his experience, what he did to overcome it. He ended up, right, wanting to target companies at Austin, right? He targeted 3 companies that he was looking for, and he ended up getting one of the 3, right? He's now at Atlassian, right? And so, Aditya, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Let me actually start, Aditya, and the questions are going to be up here, guys. So, you'll all see the questions I'm asking. could you start by just talking about how how this sort of anxiety made you feel? When did you realize that you had it, right? And just talk to us about how you felt, right, when you went in for interviews because of this anxiety.
Sure. And first of all, thank you so much, Ryan, for giving me a chance to talk about an issue and share my perspective.
My pleasure.
About an issue that I can relate to really well. And this is actually the first time I'm doing something like this, talking to a large audience. So in fact, this is making me a bit anxious as well.
That's fine.
So what anxiety meant for me? I have always experienced performance-related anxiety since high school. And when that happened, I used to feel really nervous before exams. I had sleepless nights. And I saw that the same symptoms happened before technical interviews as well. I felt helpless, tensed, angry, and occasionally angry and frustrated as I couldn't do anything about it on my own. So there was a period in my life where I had exam-related anxiety, and then for a few years, I did not have to deal with interviews. And suddenly it seemed to me that all the demons that I had left 10 years ago, they are coming back again when I started interviewing with companies. In school and college, it impacted my grades. On the personal side, it impacted my ability to socialize and make friends. But I think in recent years, I think as I have matured more as a person, I have accepted it to be a part of my personality. And that has helped me deal with it in much, much healthier ways. And that, I think, it perhaps is a reason for my success in interviewing as well.
Okay, cool. No, so that's interesting, Aditya, right? Is this something that you have actually carried with you for quite a while?
Yeah, that's true. So since school, I would say, or maybe even before, I just didn't know anything about it,
Interesting. And so, did it get better as you interviewed more often?
I think it gotten a bit better as of course, as I interviewed more often, I got more experience in interviewing itself. But I think as I did more deliberate practice, I self-audited my interviews. I had my interviews reviewed by other people. And I think the feedback that I got from that really helped me make those adjustments in my preparation. Not just from the technical aspects, but even from behavioral aspects as well. So I think that really helped me, become more successful at interviewing.
So, how did you what motivated you to keep going? Right? As I would imagine, that it could have been frustrating from time to time, right? So what gave you the stamina? What kind of allowed you to keep going through this process?
Sure. I believe that I'm a very competitive person by nature. So when I did not succeed at anything I wanted to do, and I saw that a reason for that was my anxiety, I was very, very motivated and determined to overcome it. And I think the first step in that process was to accept the fact that I had anxiety and that there's nothing wrong with it. I read biographies of famous people like, President Abraham Lincoln, tennis players like Stan Wawrinka and Andy Murray. And all of these people have documented experiences of performance anxiety. And all of them had stellar professional careers. So this gave me confidence that interview anxiety is something that I can certainly overcome and make it work in my favor, as you mentioned earlier.
Okay, interesting. I'll tell you a very interesting anecdote, Aditya, since you brought out, Abraham Lincoln. Barack Obama, who I consider as one of the best orators out there, he says that he is really nervous before every speech. So much so that he carries paper clips in his pocket, right? And he keeps untwiddling the paper clips and twirling them back and untwiddling them till literally the second before he starts speaking, right? And so even somebody like him struggles with this. Interesting. Let's actually, move this along a bit. So the next question I have for you, right, is fundamentally, there are very many people who believe that they can't succeed with it, right? Now, you talked about your preparation. Now, for folks, for those of you who don't know, Aditya was very determined, right? Like he mentioned, and he spent a significant amount of time. So, before you got into Atlassian, Aditya, quick question. How much time did you actually prepare for at that point, before the time when you were preparing before you ultimately got into Atlassian? I know you did the course as well, right? But
yeah.
How long was that prep period?
I think about, including the course, it was around 5 months.
5 months. Okay. So that's important to note, guys, right? This does take time. It does take time. It does take some amount of introspection. It can take up to 6-7 months as well, right? But 4-5 months is a good kind of mean. Okay. Now, so you took 5 months, Aditya, right? And the course was one of the things that you did, but I'm sure you did other things, right? Can you talk about what your prep looked like? Like, so what would your regime be every week in those months? How did it progress? Maybe just give us a quick outline of how this worked for you.
Sure. I think preparation wise, I used to have a time bound period where I used to practice problems related to problems of a particular kind, basically. And not really get stuck with, even if I felt uncomfortable, or even if I felt that my preparation was not up to the mark on a certain topic, I would still leave it at wherever it was and focus on the remaining topics that I wanted to do. So that gave me the confidence that I can solve a breadth of problems.
Okay.
So that is from a preparation, like choosing topics perspective. But what really helped me is the mock interviews that IK provides. Because that gave me the opportunity to do deliberate practice. And like, I used to treat a mock interview like a real interview. I used to, go through my breathing exercises that I learned from IK. I can talk a bit more about it as we go further in the discussion. I did my breathing exercises. I would adjust my sleep cycle to get a good night's sleep before my mock interview. I would dress up for the mock interview as if it was a real interview, and basically simulate that environment as if it was something real. Now, after the interview was over, I would audit my interviews. I think provided me a really, really robust methodology of auditing my interviews. And from that, I could figure out what are the things I'm lacking, very objectively. And when that happens, it automatically reduces your anxiety because you know what problem you need to deal with.
I see. Interesting.
So mock interviews and the entire preparation that led to it, the breathing exercises that I did, I think that was the game changer for me this time.
Okay. So my next question was about mock interviews. I think you've already answered that. But when we were spending some time before this, you had some very interesting techniques around breathing exercises that you were saying, right? And you were talking about the sympathetic nervous system and stuff like that. Maybe can you talk for like a minute or so on just how you try to get control of yourself and how did you try and exercise control in an interview environment?
Sure. So as you mentioned earlier in the presentation, if we can control our breathing, if we can calm ourselves down, that greatly reduces our anxiety. And I have experienced it firsthand, guys. It works. So coming to the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system that Ryan mentioned, the vagus nerve is a nerve in the human brain or in the human body. If a person is able to stimulate that nerve, that can really calm a person down. And it basically regulates the blood flow through the brain and makes a person a lot more calmer, a lot more, I would say, level-headed in that particular situation. And it allows one to make the best decisions in the moment. So I had read about the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system when I first read about Stan Wawrinka's preparation before the French Open final in 2015, I believe. It was 2016. Okay, I don't know. But again, the same thing was brought to me when I was talking to Nick, one of the career coaches at IK over here, and he also advised me to learn some breathing exercises to stimulate my vagus nerve, basically. And it would be something very simple. Just take 10 deep breaths in and out, and then repeat the cycle for 1 or 2 minutes for as long as you feel comfortable. So it's a very, very simple technique. I used to employ it every time I did mock interviews, and I employed it before every real interview I gave as well.
Awesome.
And I believe that really, really worked for me.
Okay, cool. Now, Aditya, if you're going to wait for us, just hold on for a second. Ashima, are you there? So, folks, one of our attendees, Ashima, is also on. Hey, Ashima. So, I know Ashima well. Ashima was also an IK alum. Now, Ashima had phenomenal run through, right? She's somebody who also struggled with interview anxiety and then ended up, like I said, going on to become an engineering manager at one of the FANG companies. Ashima, I know you have only like 5-6% of your battery left on your phone. So
I'm sorry about that.
No worries. Maybe can you spend like a minute or two, Ashima, just talking through your journey, right? One of the things I remember that you mentioned is that this was much tougher for you because you're a mom, right? And so you had very limited time as well, right? So, just quickly before your phone battery dies, maybe just take a couple of minutes just explaining how did you overcome interviewing anxiety? What was your journey? And, what's your story?
Sure, happy to share. So when I was interviewing in 2018, I had 2 little kids, 6 and 4 then, 7 and 5 now. So my struggle was, I knew I had to over-prepare. I was clear on that. I just didn't find the right time. My kids wake up at 6. I used to wake up at 5 trying to catch up 1 hour of study time, and it just didn't work with a regular job, taking care of kids, running a family, running a house. So the reason I reached out to IK, my biggest support system I needed to prepare was schedule. And as Aditya mentioned, being competitive by nature, I needed other people to see and follow and beat at like a competition within a smaller system first before going out into a bigger system. So that was the structure I was looking for, because the problem wasn't that I'm not smart or I can't do it. The problem was I knew I needed time to prepare. I knew that it needed a few months of dedicated study time, and I knew I needed structure. And that's when I started talking to people and trying to look out for options and what could provide me the structure. Got a referral, talked to you, came in, was an ideal student through the 2 months in the classroom setting, attended all the classes. And the 4 hours I spent in class was my dedicated time to prepare. The Sunday tests were my dedicated time to compete. And that structure really helped me prepare. And I can't say enough about over preparing. I was only preparing for an STM job, which is not as hard, so to say, in terms of the hardness levels, of complexity levels. But I still wanted to train myself as an engineering IC job, and that's where over preparation helped me.
Awesome. Now, quickly before you go, right? I just want to flip the side around, Ashima. Now you are an engineering manager, right? And so you're also interviewing candidates. Just very quickly, can you give us the interviewer view, right? And how, what thoughts are about helping candidates, giving them hints, wanting the candidate to succeed, working with the candidate. What does the worldview look like from the other side?
Yeah, as you said earlier, most people want to have people on their team. There's a demand supply problem. We have, we need people. We don't get enough smart people. And so you'll find 80-90% of the interviews being very empathetic, trying to help you, get you in. I've myself slowed people down. It's fine. Take a minute. Go get some water. And people would help you. I think you just need to know yourself a little bit more, know these techniques a little bit more to be able to take advantage of that help being offered to you. So that's a point of recognition that people want to help you. But if you don't know that that's help, you won't be able to take it. So I would definitely say that interviewers are there to support you. It is hard, it is tough. The recognition. The other thing I think you didn't mention in your slide set was you have to accept that the process might be rigged a little bit. That that you may say that these algorithm questions are not going to help me in life. Why am I being asked for it? But I feel like you should accept it, prepare for it, and that is valued in an interview. When people see that you've prepared for leadership principles, for example, in an interview, people value that. They know that you've prepared, and that counts for something. So accept the process, prepare for it. I know it's very formulatic, but still, it's important to know that there's a process to get in and prepare towards it.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashima. Thank you for your time. I can hear your little kids in the background, so I'm guessing you need to go. But that's an interesting point of view, guys, right? From a hiring manager and somebody who's actually made the shift, right? Who had interview anxiety, worked through, made the shift, and is now as an engineering manager, giving you the point of view of how managers themselves are empathetic. Coming back to Aditya, and last question, Aditya, and then I'm going to talk about summary and then throw this open to the house. Sure. So from everything that you've been through, right? What would be your parting advice to folks who do have interview anxiety, who have a bunch of questions, right? If you had to sum up your advice in a couple of sentences, what would it be?
Sure. I think interview anxiety, as we all know by now, is a very common thing, and you're not alone in experiencing it. I mean, that's what I told myself. There are proven scientific methods and resources available to overcome it, especially for an interview setting. And I think with enough determination and desire, one can definitely overcome it. And I think learning to manage anxiety not only helps in interviews, but the same techniques can be used to learn a lot of life skills as well. And that was also another great takeaway from this IK experience that I took, that the teachings and the techniques I know will help me not just in interviewing, but in other critical moments and in critical times in life as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, please. That's a very interesting insight.
Yeah. So yeah, I think the main thing is determination, the want to have something to want something so badly that you are ready to overcome any obstacles that come in your way. And I think once you have that mindset, once you have that growth mindset, and you do deliberate practice, then I think anyone can be successful with that.
I think that's a great way to wrap this up, guys. And then now, I'm going to throw this over to questions. Anybody who is determined can fundamentally succeed. Here are the key takeaways from today, folks, right? And, you have actually, we'll send out a recording of this, but the fundamental takeaways are this. The artificial nature of the interview process does create an environment for anxiety, right? It's natural, right? Everybody has it. It's a spectrum, right? So don't be hard on yourself. Accept that it's normal, right? And if you do that, and like Aditya said, if you're determined, and Aditya has shown it, Ashima has shown it, a bunch of other folks have shown it, you can do incredibly well, right? It doesn't have to hold you back. This is something Aditya mentioned to me earlier, right? When we were talking about this, preparing for this session, he said, hey, Ryan, you must surround yourself with really experienced people, but a strong support system. And Ashima talked to that as well, right? Surround yourself, and there are multiple support systems, right? Even if it's your friends and family, support yourself with good sets of folks. Use the acronym code. Control the interview, over-prepare, prepare in a very deliberate way, and remember that this is an evolutionary approach. Don't expect to be great at day one, right? If you want to learn more from an IK perspective, just go to Interview Kickstart. I run webinars often. We talk about what we do on the program. And so now, guys, I'm going to throw this open to questions, right? In terms of next steps, here's one thing that I do want to leave you with. We are going to continue this discussion, but clearly there was not enough time. I've already overshot the time here. This is something that, we could go on forever. We're going to send out an email with a link to UpLevel, which is our discussion board. On there, when you sign on, right, you will actually see the previous session that we did as well, right, which Soham did, which is actually a technical session. It talks about the interviewing rubrics, fascinating session. You can watch that video. You can watch this video, right? When you click into this video, there is going to be a discussion board. So I will man that, right? You'll have to do it tomorrow because it'll take us, a few hours to upload the video. But if you have any questions that we're not able to get to, anything that you need, right? Feel free to follow up on that discussion board. We have another session coming up in another 2 weeks. It's a technical session, right? Feel free to register for that. Quickly, before I throw this open for questions, guys, now in terms of questions, please, there's the Q&A button on the platform, right? If you look at it, there's participants, there's Q&A. I have a bunch of questions. There are 11 questions here. I'm going to try and scan them all, right? Some I will answer, right? Some I might actually move out for later. But please feel free to send your questions, right? And I'm going to take them one by one. I'm going to ask Aditya to weigh in on some. If Ashima is around, I might ask Ashima to weigh in on some as well. So please keep your questions coming, okay? Fatma's question was, hey, Ryan, thank you for the session. We've already answered that in terms of stamina. Vikram says, Aditya, thanks for being here. Aditya, so I'm assuming this is a question for you. Aditya, thanks for being here. Given that our current workplace always keeps expecting more and more time of our day, can you please share how you manage to balance the expectation of the current workplace and spending time with interview preparation? So Aditya, how did you balance work with your interview prep?
First of all, I think this is a great question. And it is honestly something that I was also in a dilemma about, how do you manage expectations at workplace compared to, and spend the rest of your day preparing for interviews. So, and I think the context for me might be different than a lot of other people. When I was preparing for interviews, I was single. So I didn't have any other responsibilities. So in that sense, I had a lot more time on my hands. But for other people, the scenario might be different. But as far as what I did, I think one needs to clearly prioritize what one's goals are, or immediate goals are in the next 6 months. If your goal is to get a suitable job in the next 6 months, switch jobs, then I think one should be prepared not to spend that extra time at work working for a promotion or a raise or something. That was a deliberate decision that I took for myself. I don't know how other people may deal with it, but I just didn't expect to be promoted or work towards that, because every place when you try to get promoted, the team demands more from you, and that's a reality. And when you prioritize a new job search over your current job, it probably means that you still have to do your job. Of course, you have to contribute because you're being paid for it. But it probably also means that you may not get the time to work towards a promotion or towards a raise, and you need to be comfortable with that idea.
I think that's a couple of great points, Aditya. Because just to add a couple of quick things, you should think of your job search as a job, okay? Rather than just as something you're doing in addition, right? Very often you must actually think of that as your main job, right? And like Aditya says, there are always, you'll always feel the need to do more at work. Don't go the last mile, right? Don't go that extra mile, and create specific time slots, right? So one of the things that we see in work for people is if you have a very strong forcing function of, a class or some meeting or some fixed time in a week that force you, like, this is my prep time, right? And when you think of interviewing as a job, you start seeing that prep time as a job, and then you start balancing it effectively, right? But if you don't, then what's happening is you're going to keep getting sucked back into your day job. Okay. Now, Rico says, how much, so when people say, so how are you, right? To start the interview, what is too much light banter? Where does it becoming rambling or too anxious, right? Now, that's a great question, right? Many people start an interview saying, hey, how was your day? How are you doing, right? Remember, that is just a introductory question, right? They don't need to know your whole life story, right? They just want to know how you're doing. They want to get you comfortable, keep it short. But here's an interesting thing you can do. The how are you doing question is a very good way to drive the C in the code acronym. It is a really good way to set the context to control the interview, right? And so that is a question that almost everybody is going to get. So frame an answer and prepare that answer in advance, right? And frame an answer in such a way that you leave some breadcrumbs, right? And when you leave breadcrumbs, somebody's going to pick them up, okay? So that first question is really your key to how to navigate the interview, right? And so prepare effectively, make it short. Your answer should be minute and a half, not more than that, okay? I have a question that's from somebody who has taken the course. It says, hey, Ryan, I've actually taken the IK course last year, didn't manage to get through it due to workload. I also find preparing for interviews very dry compared to solving problems at work, quite natural. How do you get past these blocks? It's kind of tiring to keep going at it. Okay, so I think Aditya's kind of touched upon this. The reality is, and Ashima mentioned it as well, you know, interviews are about questions that are different. You just have to accept it, right? You have to accept that this is something that you must do, right, to succeed. But let me give you an alternate perspective. The way to stop looking at them as dry problems could be, right, to step back and really take a different point of view. And that is that what you are doing is not necessarily preparing for interviews. It is fundamentally investing in yourselves to become a better engineer. Now, if you start seeing it from that context, that, hey, you know, I need to get better at algorithms and system design because they're making me a better engineer, then you align what you're doing with what your day job is, right? Because if you become a better engineer, like Ashima said, you will fundamentally get better at your day job, right? Now, think about it. Essentially, what the interview process and preparing for it is doing is helping you think algorithmically and think from a design first perspective, right? And like Aditya said, some of these techniques in terms of managing intense, you know, your anxiety, managing behavioral elements, those fundamentally not only in your job, but they fundamentally help you even beyond your job, right? So try and re-look at, right, and bring a different perspective to your prep, and then you'll realize that, hey, you know, it's not that I am doing this and it's you know, orthogonal to what I need to do at work. It is fundamentally the same thing, right? And you know, that is what I've seen has helped people in the past. Okay, now, so that question's done. Question says, one second, let me just go to the next question. The class is done. I think I missed a question. It was last year, okay. Question from Anonymous says, Ryan, do you have any recommendations in preparing for remote interviews during COVID? Yes, I do. And you know, if you go on to, you know, so I'm not going to get into answering this, but all interviews are now remote. Remote interviews are very different from on-site interviews. The most challenging component about a remote interview is that it's very difficult to read the room, right? You know, we are used to reading body signals, and that's a way of calming down. In a remote interview, you can't really see that. Now, if you really want to prepare for remote interviews well, on Interview Kickstart, in our blog, we have recently created what I think is the definitive guide to preparing for remote interviews, right? And I would urge you to read that. There are some small things you need to think about, like lighting, making sure you have water, you're comfortable. There are a couple of other things that you need to do that are deep nuances, right? Rather than going through all of that, I would point all of you to the blog on Interview Kickstart. Go there, look at that. It's very, very comprehensive. Okay, now, so on chat, there are a bunch of things also, guys. I'm going to come to that. Okay, so maybe Aditya, you can take this. There's a question that says, how do you have any advice on managing a good night's sleep before the interview day? Now, you talked about how you change your sleep regimes and how you'd make sure you get a good night's sleep. Did you do anything in particular? Did you have kind of fixed times to go to sleep, fixed times to wake up? Was there anything in particular that you did?
Sure. So I think what I did before my Atlassian interview was that I took a couple of days off before the interview day also. Okay. And that really helped me and gave me the flexibility to adjust my sleep schedule, because normally in my current job, I would always be working sometimes, with people from in different time zones and things of that nature. So I deliberately deliberately took a couple of days off before my actual interview.
Okay.
And on those nights, I tried not to look at, I tried to have as minimum screen time as possible.
Okay. Okay.
So I just felt confident about my preparation and didn't feel the need to really stay up late in the night and continue preparing as if as if I need to prepare a particular topic more. Okay. But instead, I chose to switch off my devices, have very less screen time, listen to soothing music and not rock music that I normally listen to. Instead, listen to soothing music that would help me get a good night's sleep.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what I did personally. I mean, people have their own ways, but I think that worked for me.
So, guys, there is actually a lot of really interesting stuff around sleep. There is a very, very popular book that has just come out, right? It's actually called Sleep. I can't remember who has written it, but it's one of Bill Gates's recommended books, right? So Bill Gates comes up with a list of recommended books every year, right? And I think this is in the 2019 list. There is a book. I think it's called Why We Sleep, if I'm not mistaken. It's a fabulous book, right? And if you are interested in figuring out how to get a good night's sleep, that's a good one to read, right? Somebody says, do we get a recording of this? Yes, we'll send out an email. You get a recording. We'll continue this discussion. So Nishida, Aditya, another question for you, says, hey, thanks, Aditya, thanks for sharing your experience. What feedback and review sessions helped you overcome anxiety? So I think she's talking about, when you did mock interviews and you said, I got feedback, I internalized it, and that helped me overcome anxiety. Maybe talk a bit more about how some of that mock interview feedback helped you, and what was some of that feedback that helped you. In the meantime, guys, a couple of you have asked to re-look at the code slide, right? The acronym for how you prepare. So I'm going to keep that up here and let Aditya answer.
Sure. I think the feedback template that IK provided for mock interviews was very granular, and it examined every fine point or aspect of how interviews are graded. So it would have a score for the technical part, and even in the technical part, it would have score for whether the candidate understood the problem, whether the candidate solved the right problem, and was the candidate able to solve it, provide a right solution, and then was the candidate able to code it. And on the behavioral aspect, there were metrics for the level of confidence, communication skills, humility, and other soft skills and traits, basically. And so when you get that granular feedback, it helps you focus on the right things. And as I mentioned earlier, when you know what you need to focus on or what aspects you need to work on, it automatically reduces your anxiety, because you are not fighting the unknown, you are fighting a known problem, right? And that is how I think the feedback system really helped me.
Okay, thanks. So guys, in terms of so essentially, when you think about interviewing, Nishad, like Aditya said, now at Interview Kickstart, we do this in a very formal way, right? We have a whole bunch, we have like 15 interviews that everybody can take. And, we have very detailed written feedback that you're getting. We have a recorded version. You can discuss it with your coach. But let's say you weren't doing this on Interview Kickstart, right? And you're doing this with a friend, or you're doing this with somebody else. Ask them to write down feedback for you, right? Not just share verbal feedback, and that's why I say record interviews, because when you go back, you will forget some of this, right? So, like Aditya said, having a bunch of things that you're rated on really helps you internalize. And, one of the things Aditya told me before this is when he had done multiple interviews, right? And he looked at this feedback over time, you then start seeing trends, right? And then you understand what areas you need to work on more or less. Okay, now, Somesh, you raised your hand. I have just unmuted you. I'm not sure if you can hear me, Somesh. Was there something that you wanted to say? Somesh, can you hear me? Okay, maybe not. Okay, I think there are a few more questions, guys. Let's wrap this up in the next 5-10 minutes. I think we've gone well over time. right? Surbi has a question saying, any tips on remote interviews? So, Surbi, look at the blog. Joel has kindly shared the link to the Interview Kickstart blog on chat, guys, but it's there on the blog. You can just go ahead and look at it. Any advice on this is a great question. Any advice on recovering after a bad interview, especially if it's a traumatizing experience happening in the same company and you're trying again? Okay, this is a very, very good question. Let me actually take this. Let's go back to this process, right? You will have bad interviews for sure, right? Just like we said, you will have bad dates, right? I've had a few. Now, in terms of interviews, remember that one interview doesn't have an impact on the next interview. It is a finite event that once it's done, it's done. Okay. This is why companies have you interview with 5 or 7 different sets of folks. Companies know that you can have a bad interview. And so it's okay, right? So the first thing you should know is that even if you have one horrible interview in a round of 5 to 7 interviews, you can still make it through to the company. So the core to bouncing back from a bad interview is to remember that it's not the end of the world. It happened. It was one bad interview. It's one bad audition, right? And it's more about how you learn from that experience, right? And hence that graph. If you had a bad interview, go back, you build resilience and get better. But remember, one bad experience, one bad interview doesn't necessarily impact the next interview at all, even in the same company, even in the same interviewing processes, right? There are times where we have made incredibly high offers, right? Where somebody's absolutely bombed one interview, right? And those offers can be 300K, 400K as well, because as a hiring manager and a hiring committee member, as a hiring committee, that one bad interview is completely acceptable, right? So I just know that it is okay, and that it is unlikely that one bad interview is going to fundamentally affect your ability and a company's decision-making process while looking to hire you. Now, if you have 2 or 3 bad interviews, yes, it's unlikely that you're going to succeed, but a couple, one bad interview is completely okay. All right. I think, thanks so much, Ryan. Thanks so much, Ryan. Thanks so much. Great session. Thanks for your time to share experience. Preference go, for example, I'm thinking 2 weeks per public. Okay. Okay, guys, there are a bunch of, I think, questions, broadly we've answered most. I'm just going through the chat. There are a bunch of other questions out there. Okay, I think we broadly covered everything, folks. I just want to, let you know that we will be continuing this discussion. And so some of these questions we will actually take on the UpLevel discussion board. You'll get access to that tomorrow. Just go there, put in your questions. I will answer them. Feel free to respond, to all of those questions, and we can keep the discussion going for a while. I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Remember that impossible is in fact nothing, right? People have bounced back from very, very challenging outcomes, very challenging setbacks, right? And have gone on to achieve phenomenal things. The interview process is challenging for sure. You don't have to worry about overcoming interview anxiety. You have to worry about just dealing with it. That's all you need to focus on. Thank you, Aditya. Ashima, thank you very much. Thank you all of you for being here. I hope this was useful, right? Please drop us a line, and if you guys want to, get in touch with any of us at Interview Kickstart, send an email to start@interviewkickstart.com. I'm at ryan@interviewkickstart.com. If you want to learn more about the program, sign up for a webinar. We'll talk a lot more about how the program works. Join the discussion forum, guys. And every 2 weeks, we are going to come up with a session. The next one is a deeply technical session. So we're going to have a mix of technical, non-technical. We're going to invite some really pedigreed folks from our instructor panel, as well as brilliant engineers in general, right, to talk about things like microservices, AI, ML, and we want to try and do this for the community over a period of time, right? Thank you all very much, folks. Have a superb evening. Appreciate you taking the time. Aditya, special thanks to you. Thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Aditya.
Pleasure.
Cheers, guys. Good night.